Many people have asked me if I have ancestry in Russia, and I had absolutely no connection with Russia or the Soviet Union except to fear the Soviet Union during the Cold War, as many people did. And from the movies and the propaganda, I thought Russians were cold, hard-hearted people, that the Soviets were going to start World War III and blow us up. So when the Berlin Wall fell and then it was clear the Soviet Union was disintegrating, I was so grateful there had been no war and no bombs dropped, and most of the countries of the former Soviet Union were going to try to come into democracy and free market economies. I had to do something. I just had to do something. Why don't we adopt a sister city and bring over businessmen and businesswomen and train them how to do business in a free market economy? The first thing Mayor Whalen and I did was put together a steering committee. And we had volunteers from the city and from colleges and universities and a few people from the business community. And we had to decide on a city, and we found TULA because we wanted a city that was as similar as possible to the capital region, because we knew we were going to have a lot of problems even communicating. So we found TULA because it has about now 500,000 people. Then it had more than that. The capital region has about 800,000. We have educational institutions of higher learning, and so does TULA. We are on a river and the capital of the state of New York, easily accessible from New York City. TULA is on a river, the capital of the region or oblast of TULA, easily accessible 120 miles south of Moscow. And it was impressive to us that TULA was the home of Tolstoy. And so Mayor Whalen wrote a letter to then Mayor Tiglivy and said, would you like to have a sister city? And the mayor of TULA opened his arms and said, yes, we want a sister city. That's how we started. The first time that I went to TULA was with a delegation in the summer of 1992. The roads were in terrible shape. There were no gas stations on the sides of the road. Now the roads are a ribbon of blacktop, and there are more modern gas stations along the way than you will see in the United States. And in the last few years, there have been tremendous improvements in the infrastructure. And new houses have gone up, and buildings have been repaired, and streets have been repaired. And the attitude has changed. Initially, Americans went over there to help the Russians, and they needed help, and they accepted it. But the Russians are very well educated and very proud people. And as soon as they were able, they let us know very clearly they didn't want handouts, they wanted partnerships. These experiences are what have really made me a better person and enhanced my life so much.
Hello, Boris.
I've been in many homes in TULA, and usually whether the people are at the top of the ladder or at the bottom until recent years, they live in apartments that are maybe 700 to 1,100 square feet. There might be 2 people or there might be 8 people living in this space. So the living room doesn't double as something, it triples. It is the living room, it's the dining room, and it's a bedroom. And sometimes the dinners for 8 people were served on a coffee table in front of the sofa. And it was beautifully served. It was delicious. And everybody had a wonderful time. The Albany-TULA Alliance from the beginning has been 100% volunteer. We've never employed even one person full-time. We've had a part-time administrator and a part-time bookkeeper, and everybody else involved gives whatever it is that we're doing. We have a very strong education committee, and I think the educational exchanges are probably the most valuable. We have focused on exchanges of professors, which has been very successful. We have connections with Union College that are very strong. Most of the colleges in the area have a relationship with colleges in TULA. That's been terrific. We also now and have had this very strong relationship in the environment and healthcare. And we now have a strong relationship between our School of Public Health and TULA State University. They're working on the development, the initial proposals and development of a research project, and this would be in environmentally caused childhood asthma, which could have ramifications not just in our communities, but vastly throughout the world. So we contribute to each other, and together we make stronger teams. When you look back 20 years, we've been involved for 20 years. For a lot of young people, that's an extraordinarily long time. But for those of us who've been involved for 20 years, the time has flown by. The whole experience, all of the contacts, the accomplishments have made differences in so many lives on both sides of the world. It needs to continue between the Capital Region and TULA, but it can happen between any community in the world and the Capital Region, or other communities and other sister cities.
I've made a total of 8 trips to TULA, the first one being in 1993, and the most recent one just last year, when we were able to participate in the celebration of TULA State University's 80th anniversary. What I'm doing personally with the Albany-TULA Alliance and what I'm doing professionally in my role with Empire State Development dovetail nicely. And what makes me really happy now is we seem to be breaking through and are very close to developing business between TULA and Albany. I think we've been successful on the education front and the cultural front. Health and environment, legal issues have been discussed successfully between TULA and here. We've had conferences in gerontology with the School of Social Welfare, but we have never gotten as close as we are today to developing real business between businesses in TULA and business people here. So I think we are very close to seeing transactions, whether it's exports or imports or joint ventures, going to be happening between TULA and Albany. We're going to be using students to do market research, because I teach here in the Capital Region at University at Albany and Union Graduate College. I've lectured to universities in TULA, which is one of my greatest pleasures. And we're very close to having a professor on TULA State's faculty assigned to work with us to have TULA students do market research for Capital Region businesses. I think we have a model sister city program and a model for the country in citizen diplomacy. I think the generation, my generation, the generation of some of us who helped start the Albany-TULA Alliance, should give way to a younger generation of people that will feel no constraints. And I'd like to see TULA and Albany reach out to other sister cities together.
I probably first visited TULA in 1992 and had a look at the facilities, and honestly I was shocked. For example, hospital care was pretty much a disaster. Patients brought their own clothing, the families furnished the food, the toilets were filthy. I can remember newspaper on the floor for the facility of the patients to take care of themselves. It was a serious problem, and I got to visit some of the health centers, and their medical records were carried home by the patients. You spent hours sitting in waiting rooms that were cramped and ugly. In other words, the system was totally inefficient. My reaction to all of this is that it was pretty apparent how I could help if given the freedom to do something. Fortunately, there was the hospital district number 3 that invited me to speak to the doctors and staff to see what could be done with that particular health center. So that was a very opportune beginning. We then went to work and took half of the hospital district health center, literally cut it in 2 and renovated half and changed the organization, the look, and the way things were done. And when that was completed, we renovated the other half. It was a tremendous revelation when all was working very well. My lasting legacy is that I wanted to develop a healthcare system, and I think that was accomplished.
And actually, I was in TULA long before anybody in Albany ever heard of it, because it was the birthplace of Leo Tolstoy, and I went there with my students. There are a number of trips that stand out in my mind. Certainly, the Victory Parade, 1995, was 50 years of victory over the. By the way, the Russians never called them the Germans, they called them the fascist invaders. I rarely heard the word German mentioned when they talked about the Nazis. It was called the fascist invaders, and it was the Victory Parade. All the World War II veterans that were left marched down the main street of Tula, as did the people from the Alliance. The changes in Tula, of course, I saw it under communism. There were shortages all over the place. People didn't get paid. People did not have, well, they had food, but you stood in lines, of course, and it gradually got better. And now it's very Western. They actually have shopping centers, of which they are very proud. There have been enormous changes in the, let's say, the 20 years that the Alliance has been has been working. Attitudes have changed certainly in those 20 years. Women were liberated, more things became available. I taught at the State Pedagogical University, the Leo Tolstoy University. These were students in the English department. Their command of English was and is incredible. The level of language and their facility, and it has just impressed me. Many of the Tulans who come here claim they don't know English, but they really do. My house is called a Russian hotel. I always have Russian visitors and from Tula, and that's what one of the people from the State University called me. He says, "You're the Russian hotel."
I was interested in joining the TULA Alliance after visiting Tula especially, and found that I wasn't a person of particular wealth or connections to be able to bring forward to bear on interests that the Alliance might have. However, there was something I could do, which was apply my own effort, and this took the form of being a secretary. People go very fast when they're giving their committee reports. They refer to people whose names I can't spell. They refer to people whose affiliations I don't know. This takes 8 or 10 hours of work to do. I'm very impressed with the caliber of the people who are involved, and I enjoy their professional devotion to this job.
I actually started working with the Alliance in somewhat of a consultative mode. I was interested at that time in the early 1990s in the Chernobyl accident and in thyroid cancer that was occurring in contaminated areas following the Chernobyl accident. So just to put that into historical perspective, that accident occurred in 1986, and cases of thyroid cancer started appearing in several parts of Russia and Belarus in the early 1990s. And I went over to Russia in about 1993 and developed some collaborations with folks in Moscow. And we knew that there had been some radioactive fallout in the TULA Oblast, or the state of Tula, not the city, but it was south of the city. So my colleagues in Moscow and I had done a number of field surveys in the Tula Oblast. We set up clinics and had patients come in. We screened their thyroids for nodules, did biopsies, actually sent a few patients to Moscow for surgery, and we were operating mostly south of the city. I remember in particular one child who had growth hormone deficiency, and since I was an endocrinologist, a letter came from the mayor of Tula to me, and they were asking for help in getting growth hormone, which of course is very expensive. It costs more than $20,000 a year, and this child didn't have access to it. So we were able to get a company in the United States to donate that. There's also been, over the years, a very strong focus on supporting the orphanage in Tula. Tula has had 2 orphanages. Traditionally, one of them was governed by the city, the other by the Tula Oblast or state. And over the years, the Alliance brought many resources there, which has been a tremendous benefit to the children who've been in that orphanage and to the staff, so that they can do a better job in carrying out their day-to-day activities. And I'm particularly proud of that. The Alliance has really done a lot to help that orphanage.